To be here at this conference and to meet everyone. Paul, I think we were going to structure this as a fireside chat discussion. So maybe I'll just say a few words to introduce myself. I grew up in Zambia, in Central Southern Africa. I came to the U.S. for college, and like a lot of immigrants, ended up staying. I'm a technologist. I studied computer engineering. I spent most of my career at Intuit. I was there for 22 years, a variety of roles. I was a software developer, but my niche that I established for myself, I learned that I loved working on new to the world products and services. So I helped the company launch a lot of those. My last position there was VP of Innovation. I ran an internal incubator. Since then, I've had an entrepreneurial journey, and also I started my board work. But really, my passion is around innovation, and specifically this notion that great ideas can come from anywhere. And so, how do you promote voices from throughout the ecosystem, throughout the company, especially people on the front lines? And of course, that ties to diversity. How do you make sure you have an organization that really embraces people from different perspectives and walks of life? I currently serve on the boards of Mozilla and a South African-based company called World. So I'll pause there, Paolo, and see if you have anything to start the conversation.
Hugh, guess what? You have me. And
Oh, I
that's
have you, Leslie.
how
Okay.
are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Wonderful. So, look, you speak about innovation, and I want to kind of break that down for people because I think that's another word that is slowly starting to balloon into whatever anyone wants it to be at the moment. So, when you say innovation, because I know what I think of certain companies that are really in their studios building things. And I went into one office and they had gnats and mosquitoes flying over the top to test the speed of that's innovation to me. When you think of innovation and how it plays out with merit, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have a very expansive view of what innovation is. It's really just making things better.
Oh,
It
I love
doesn't have to be inventing the next iPhone or the next, artificial intelligence engine. It could be just there's a process at work, maybe that takes 5 days and you innovate and now it takes 2 hours. That can be very impactful to a company's bottom line. But how it ties to innovation is because um, in the way I would describe it is, often you'll find in certain companies only certain people are looked to for their ideas.
Yes.
And what's really interesting, this is something that we talk about in a book I wrote with one of my colleagues. It's The Entrepreneur's Journey, and there was a book we wrote about how to develop a culture of innovation within a large company, because you often have this paradox: the larger you become, the more bureaucratic, the more process laden,
Yes.
and then you find that these companies all start to grapple with the fact that growth is hard and they're not innovating like, maybe a lot of startups are. But what we talk about in that situation, what you most often see is that your biggest underutilized assets tend to be the ideas in your employees' heads.
Mhm.
Because if you go to the frontline employees, they're the people working on the products, they're the people working with customers. And so they're bombarded, daily with insights on how to make things better.
Yes.
But in a typical company, those are not the people who are asked to innovate, to asked to reinvent processes. It's typically the people making those type of decisions are the senior leaders. And
Who
if
are
you think
not on the
about how they
floor.
spend most of their day, it's in meetings with other senior leaders, so they don't have the
Yes.
same type of insights. So really, when I think about diversity, it's this whole notion that you value ideas from wherever they come from, and I feel like that served Intuit well, where I spent most of my career.
I love that. And there's a couple things that you said there. One, I did a cultural survey with a large company, and the language that was used among the senior leadership and the language that was used among those that were actually in the field doing the work, and the lack of connection for lack of, was unbelievable. And until I bought it back and said, you are missing one, money on the table. Let's start with leadership talk. You're losing money on the table because you're not listening to the people that are in the field, that are hearing from your consumer,
Yes.
and building on that. There is an amazing corporate company. I guess I won't say the name here, but I am so in love with them because they are truly about innovation, regardless of what department you are in. As long as you get your job done, what you were paid to do, you can form committees and groups to work on something that's a passion project.
Yes.
Many of those passion projects become part of their products. If we could only just take a moment. So, what do you tell leaders that are missing that mark, that need to listen beyond where they sit?
Well, usually the what is I think the most difficult concept for leaders to embrace is what you just described. This notion that let me give my employees time to work on their own ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say their own ideas, this is really not, well, they should run it by me first, or I have a vetted list of things I want people. It's really this notion that people, again, I'm working with customers, I'm working on the product, I have these insights, and I can get together with a group of employees and then we can come up with something. That is the difficult notion of giving that time and freedom.
Right.
But again, as we found, the most innovative companies do have programs where they allow for employees to spend some percentage of their time working on these problems that they're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And there've been huge successes that have come from different companies that started as as you described, passion projects. Everybody probably in this on this webinar has uses Gmail. Well, Gmail started as a passion project at Google from an employee who had this idea to take a project that had been shut down and said, well, I can use these assets to create an email program. Fast forward to today, that's the most widely used email program in the world. At Intuit, we built the first mobile tax software. Again, people thought it was crazy. Why would you want to do your taxes on a phone? But of course, today that doesn't seem that what crazy an idea. So the list goes on and on and on, and that again is the value of empowering your employees to work on their ideas.
And with it, empowering employees comes the fact that it can't be limited employees. It can't be the you don't fit the picture of innovation for me.
Yeah,
You,
absolutely. At Intuit, I think some of our biggest successes came from call center employees.
Mhm.
And again, when you think about it, it makes sense because they're literally talking with customers all day long.
Right.
And so, they would, you know, brainstorm what are the biggest problems that we're seeing? How could we solve it? And again, these are call center employees, not who you would typically think would be coming up with great innovations.
Right. So when you're looking for an employee then, and you're in an innovative company or a tech company, what should you be looking for? And I'm trying to give the leaders and people that are sitting here listening, I want them to walk away with, I didn't think about that. Or I need to input that into my hiring or measuring merit along the way.
Yeah, that we titled this talk, about retiring the lunch test
Yes.
because I want to start with what you shouldn't do. And I wrote a blog about how when I was a young engineer and I was first asked to be part of an interview panel, of course we did our technical screen, but then one question we were asked as part of the panel was, hey, is this a person you would like to have lunch with if you were, they were just somebody random that not somebody you have to work with? Which, at the time I thought, wow, that's a great question because yes, I would only want to have lunch with somebody who, I liked, somebody who was pleasant or, I enjoyed spending time with. And it
Mhm.
makes sense for that to be a question I'm asked because if we hired this person, I'm going to be spending a lot of time with them.
Right.
But of course, what I learned since was that actually that question is loaded with bias, right?
Mhm.
That type of a question means I'm more likely to feel an affinity to somebody who's similar to me. I'm likely to actually feel those bad vibes if somebody, just has a very different background than I do. And, of course, what's insidious is a lot of those feelings, those responses are, below the surface, things that I'm not consciously thinking about. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, the consequences are that you end up not hiring people who are qualified just because they are different. So, I think it's when it comes to innovation, my experience, and I think there's a lot of research to back this up, is that the most innovative teams have people with different backgrounds, different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Because it's those amalgamation of perspectives and ideas that actually leads you to really truly breakthrough ideas. And so, that's the biggest thing. Don't try and just hire people who are just like you. Actually relish people who are different. And part of that is being very intentional, being very explicit in terms of how you hire. And that's why I say retire the lunch test, or put a different way, don't just make it about gut feel.
Right. So that goes back to your culture of innovation. If you want people that are innovative or have that mindset, or have that passion toward making it better, as you say, then you have to build a culture that allows that to happen and is set from top down, side across, bottom up. There has to be something different. And so I know a lot of times when I interview, I will go to the receptionist after that person and I want to know how they came in and came out.
Uh-huh.
Because sometimes that's the real moment.
Yes.
Are they rushing in and they're flustered because
Yeah.
they are 2 minutes late? Or are they a little late and say, I hope you received my call that I was running late. I'm here to see. And not that that's a determining factor, but it does give you an insight how people handle certain situations. And I think it is more than our gut. We have to really stop asking the same questions and maybe ask, what's your passion? What do you enjoy doing? What do you like? What's innovation to you?
Yeah.
What do you see? Because we are so busy doing that lunch check. So, what else shouldn't they be doing? Or what's the best thing to do? Once someone's in the company and they say they've been hired for all this innovation, it doesn't really happen. Now what?
Well, again, I come back to what for us is just a fundamental principle. Give people that, empower people, give them the time and freedom to work on the ideas. And I think to go along with that, especially if you're talking about screening, you want people who are going to be willing to stick their neck out, ask the questions. Why is the process this way? Why does the product work this way?
Right.
Because you will find that for a lot of us, I think nobody's immune to this. When you work in a company for a long time, you actually get blind to a lot of the issues that exist. And often, when a new person comes in, they'll have a lot of questions. And so, what you don't want to do is have a culture where it's like, stop asking so many questions. You're being annoying. But in fact, those questions often can be very insightful. I liken it to anybody who uh, may have a lot of dogs that they live with at home. Some breeds of dog
Mhm.
can have a strong smell, and so you walk into the person's house and it hits you, but you find the people living there, are nose blind to it, right? And
Right.
so I use that as sort of a metaphor of what you will find in companies where in the culture of innovation is missing, is that you've become now so subservient to your bureaucracy and processes, and you don't welcome this notion of people asking questions, pushing back, and wanting to do things differently. So you want people who are wired that way, because that's what's going to drive change.
Mm. There is a company that makes everyone change their seat every 3 months. Now, a little annoying, which you put up your little troll dolls and you
Yeah.
get all settled, but he does that because he doesn't want anyone to lose their edge of being innovative. He wants people to switch departments. And so you become an expert of the business.
Yes.
And yes, you still focus, but there's still opportunities. And that when we think about merit, you're bringing someone in, but you're also giving them the opportunity to learn something new. And I think that's missing. And I think it's missing to go allow employees to ask, hey, I would love to know more about that position. What does that look like? Can I shadow someone on my lunch hour? And we lose that. And so you put this barrier for merit so high with innovation, with inclusion, yet you don't connect it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's similar to what you just mentioned. I think companies where you have programs where employees can go to a call center and listen to calls is also very powerful. Or you go at Intuit, we had what we called Follow Me Homes, where we actually go and visit customers, in their homes or in their place of business.
Hmm.
I find that that is a really helpful way of getting you sort of out of your daily mindset and being open to some of the challenges there. So I think different ways, yes, of just broadening your perspective can be very valuable.
One, when I was doing all the bias, workshops, one of the slides I would put up is who comes to your home? And I would say, not FedEx, not Amazon, not UPS. Who do you have in your home? Because your home is something that is, I hope for most are special to you, that means something to you. And so to open your door and to say, come in, beyond having lunch with someone that is required or that may be in the same space, how do you move through that? And people were thrown off by that a little bit, you know, and it was all the but, and I'm like, I'm not saying go find a new friend. I'm just saying think about what your perception is if someone you don't feel is the same caliber, merit, or social status as someone said earlier that you present. Then how are you ever going to build a culture of inclusion, a culture of merit, a culture of innovation if your folks don't think, move, see beyond themselves? You know?
Yeah, I think that's a really great insight. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that's why, again, diverse teams are more innovative because I think about what you just said, the expression you are what you eat. I think you are who you interact with on a frequently basis, and which means that there's a whole world of experiences and just perspectives that you don't have. And it's valuable to have people around you who can complement you in terms of what perspectives that you do bring to the table.
Absolutely. What else would you like to share that you want people to know about the work that you do?
Yeah, so one thing I'm very passionate about, in my board work is, how we can do a better job as boards in bringing in the right skills to the boardroom. Again, I feel like in the past, boards have been too much about the buddy system, who let me get my friend on the board.
Yes.
But even beyond that, this notion that you can actually create a board where the skills that are on the board are actually helpful to the company and helps the company deliver in their strategy and complements the management in terms of the skills that they may be missing.
Mhm.
And so having a very rigorous approach to putting together a skills matrix is something that I think is very important. I mean, the good news is we're seeing many more boards starting to take this notion of skills matrices much more seriously. That we see in the S&P 500 the mention of the skills matrix has doubled from 38% just in 2020 to 80% in 2025. So there's good progress there. And the reason I'm that I'm passionate about it is because again, um, without a rigorous process and without really being thoughtful about what skills are needed on the board, it often then comes back to, again, gut feel.
Yes.
And often I've seen a lot of board recruitment where, you're interviewing a candidate, and then when you're having a discussion, you find out that you're not even aligned on what you're looking for. People have different priorities, people think about different skills and whatnot. And so that can create an inefficient process and certainly a frustrating experience for candidates. But again, if with a better approach, a rigorous approach, I feel like that's one that is more likely to align with this notion of merit, and also one more likely, and then this might seem ironic, but more likely to deliver a board that has diverse representation.
I'm laughing through this, Hugh, because I did an interview last week and I see that there are two questions. And Susan, I'm going to get to you as soon as I finish my story here. And I laughed because it was a friend that asked me, would I come to be on this board? And I kept saying, tell me what you're looking for and what you need. Before I even start the interview process, I
Yeah.
purposely have stepped off of boards. I kind of got it halfway a little bit. And when I went to meet everyone, I could tell immediately I was way too much for them, way too much energy over Zoom already. I could tell the young person understood what I was saying. The one person heard one thing and was like, "Oh, you can raise money for us." And I was like, absolutely, I cannot. That is not what I do. I tell you how to spend the money, how to stretch it, how to build it, how to shape it. And don't go get it though. And because that's what she wanted. Forget
Yes.
all the other things that I could bring. They just had it in their head, which is fine, but she couldn't see beyond what else there was to offer. So I think having that clear picture on boards, and when you're asking people of diverse outside of your world to come into it, you've got to be able to bend with it. And then that goes to Susan. I'm going to do your questions in different order that you gave them because I want to stay with the board. How influential are shareholders when it comes to board decisions and action on inclusion and innovation?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. That's a great question. Now, I would say, shareholders are very influential. I mean, the board is essentially representing the interests of shareholders. And so, obviously, if the shareholders are unhappy with the work that the board is doing, we as board directors can be fired. Um, but having said that, I think a lot of what we've seen in recent times, there's been increased activism. Just last year, there were over 240 campaigns by activists, and they secured 100 and something like 119 board seats. And so
Mhm.
it's a current issue of where you're seeing a lot of shareholders who are maybe not happy with the actions of a board. And really the way to address that is for boards to do a much better job of telling their story. Here's our strategy. Here's
Yes.
why we have the people we have on the board. And here's why we think certain things are important. It's when we, and again, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, I'm of the belief that the board has to tell the story about why that's important.
Yes.
Again, what's been very interesting to see with a lot of these activist actions. Very few. There's been very almost no success in getting companies to remove their DEI programs via proxy votes, and so that to me is very encouraging. Again, you can tell the story. We know that there's a strong business case for it, and shareholders generally have supported them.
Thank you. The other question is it possible to successfully pitch this concept of an innovative culture to a company where the leadership doesn't want to change?
Yeah, I guess the short answer is no. But what I will tell you is that the book I wrote, and this was not meant to really to plug it, but it's the entrepreneur's journey. We really wrote it as a how-to guide on how to change the culture. And really, the first step is to convince leadership that this is the right thing to do. And they're just case studies. There's so many case studies we share and so much data to share where we show that this is just good business. This is how the best companies have driven growth. And so that is with that with that data, we feel um, you can be successful even if you're starting with a leadership that may be skeptical, but the data often is very compelling and can change minds.
And I think it's twofold. I agree with you. Same way in my book or when I work with companies and I'm working with leadership, I've worked with leadership that wanted no parts of any of this,
Uh-huh.
but their employees did. And so what I did was continue to have the conversation with leadership. but I asked them to put a chief of staff in place if they did not have one. And so there was that liaison of someone that was trusted and was getting the work done. As I continue to have a conversation with he and the leadership and that liaison to continue to build a case. And they saw the difference. The staff saw things changing. Then the CEO actually came onto a webinar and said, and this inclusive, and they said they all fell out the chair. They were like, that's Leslie. That's not his words. It's inclusive anything. But it slowly started to understand that he was receiving less complaints. Things
Uh-huh.
were starting to move. There was an equity that was being built, and we set up a merit, what it really looks like. How do you achieve it? And every last thing. Or we said that's not going to happen. You're not going to achieve that because that's already settled through the board that who the next CEO is. So you're not going to be CEO of this company. But and so I think it's I don't like to say transparency. I like to say making sure there's visibility on what the merit steps are, what innovation means to someone, what inclusion is within your culture, because we can throw all these words around and say we want an inclusive board until it's time to actually hear someone else have a different opinion of how you should spend your money and build that company, and then you know people change. So, Hugh, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. We want to make sure everyone can connect to you. And I'm sure Paula will put your LinkedIn in if that's the best way for people to connect with you.
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me, and I'm usually on it almost every day. So love to hear from people, love to connect.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts with us.